Good evening. I'd like to call the Concord Township Zoning Commission meeting for Tuesday, August 7th, 2018 to order. A relatively short agenda this evening. Our first agenda item is a work session for the Town Hall Neighborhood and Town Hall Commons District, which is presently tabled. And being as it's been tabled since March, I thought I would entertain at least some dialogue to discuss when we might want to either open it or if we want to just set that aside. I know that last time we were kind of at a bit of a crossroads. We had a bunch of properties coming at us, and that stuff has all sort of moved along, and we haven't really resolved that. I don't know, Heather, have you had any further correspondence with anybody about that area? Is there any information might be relevant to whether we keep this on the agenda or move it along?
Well, maybe I'll just give a little brief history of what we did and why we even started kind of looking at that. So back in January of this year, we had that map amendment request on Concord Hamden Road to rezone those 2 acres from Town Hall neighborhood to R1. And that really, got this board taking a look at, okay, should we start studying this area? And then right after that, we also got the zoning text amendment from a different applicant to try to change the Town Hall neighborhood district to allow for residential in there, and affected all of that Town Hall neighborhood. We went through those public hearings, and at that time back in March, I'm gonna back it up, I provided a little background on both the Town Hall neighborhood and Town Hall Commons district. What are the existing land uses there? What was surrounding them? What was permitted and conditionally permitted in the districts? And then we decided at that point that we would table any further discussion because we had these other pending applications in front of the board to try to wait those things out to see what happened. So it has been tabled for the last few months. There was actually an applicant went in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals and even tried to get a use variance on some of the property that's currently zoned Town Hall neighborhood. But that request was denied. But since that time too, we've been really busy with other things happening in the Cryle Road corridor that's gotten staff super busy with development plans. As you know, we've had another public hearing for another map amendment along Cryle Road to rezone about 3 acres from R2 to PUD, from the R2 PUD to BX, which ultimately did get approved by the trustees, and that was the old strip of B&O right-of-way that ran behind Concord Motorsports and 84 Lumber. So that was approved, and that's why you had in your packet the revised zoning map too, because that was the change that was reflected on the revised zoning map. But since then too, staff and this board have reviewed several other site plan review applications. Things are really picking up in the corridor. We've looked at the Holiday Inn Express. We had a site plan review application for the addition to Anytime Fitness, site plan review and design review for the Verizon store and for the ZSI manufacturing on Cryle Road. And then also staff has been in conversations with the group that's representing the McDonald's that's on Auburn Road. They're getting ready to do a major site improvement update to that facility, converting it to the double drive-through lane, redoing a complete facade update, all new landscaping, parking. So we've been spending a lot of time helping them go through our code and make sure when they submit an application to this board that they hopefully can get a full approval. We've also been in conversations with another hotel at the end of Gold Court. So we've been focused a lot on current development on Cryle Road. So I guess what I'm kind of saying is staff would probably recommend at this point not looking into the Town Hall neighborhood and Town Hall Commons district any further. I know it was brought up by a resident at our last meeting that they'd like us to do a corridor study looking at both Town Hall neighborhood and Town Hall Commons and the BX in that area. And at this time, I think we would better use our time and resources to hold off on that, focus on the development that's happening currently. And also there's some other reasons too that I'm not sure some of you may or may not be aware. But in 2017, the township had a study done from the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association where they completed a fire station feasibility study and location analysis for Concord Township. The study looked at our existing fire stations to make a determination whether or not it was feasible to repair, reconstruct, and/or rebuild those facilities. The study ultimately concluded that the stations would need to be rebuilt. This study can be found on the township website if you want further information on that, but as a result of the study, the township advertised and received several RFQs from different architectural firms. And at this point, the trustees are evaluating those RFQs and trying to make a decision soon as to what firm they might be working with. Once a firm's been selected, the first phase of the project will deal with programming, planning, and site location for these fire stations. And the 2017 study showed that the location for the fire station number 1, that's located right here at the Town Hall Commons, should remain here at the Town Hall campus, which is kind of how we all refer to this area. Exactly where in the campus, that site has not been determined yet. So I think it may be beneficial to hold off on looking at what we do around the Town Hall campus until we have a better understanding of where the fire station will be sited. Because we also know that the comprehensive plan has also identified this commons area as a recreational asset for the township as well. So the way things kind of seem like it would make sense is to determine where the fire station will go, and then to plan where, if we need to relocate some of the recreation facilities that are currently here, or if there's expansion of any, and then that gives us a little time to see how this will lay out. And then additionally, we have just a little bit further down State Route 608, the elementary school that's going to be opening next fall. What kind of impacts will that have to this area? Will there be increased traffic or other things that will happen? It might behoove us to wait and see too, once that is open, and have a better picture of this area and what happens with the school. And then maybe at that point, if we want to reevaluate again the Town Hall neighborhood district, I think we're okay with the Commons district as far as what uses are and what the purpose of that is and the long-term vision. But I think if we wait until some of these other things fall in place, it might be beneficial. So.
Are they feel they need an upgrade because they're outdated, or we're going to be bringing in more equipment for the fire departments?
Well, the stations that we have are built in the 1960s.
Right.
So based on their thorough analysis, that it was determined that it wouldn't be feasible to try to repair or reconstruct them for several reasons that I don't have all those reasons for you tonight, but I know that the fire chief is more than happy to discuss that with you further, or you can find the study online. But basically, it wouldn't be beneficial to try to repair the existing facilities. They do have, I know that they do have equipment that they currently have that cannot be housed properly. They have an ambulance that is currently stored at the service department, and if they ever need to use that, it really delays their response time because they have to get the key for the ambulance, drive over to the service department, unlock the gate, get into the building, unlock the building, undo the alarm, get into the vehicle, pull it out, reset the alarm, lock the building back up, come out, lock the gate. So it's just, they don't have the right storage currently for the equipment that they already have.
Oh man.
They use the Red Barn across the street here over by the soccer field for storage of additional hoses and equipment like that, which is, things aren't being properly stored. So I know that the facilities that they currently have aren't meeting the needs that they
It's
have.
just not adequate to hold everything. Thank you.
Heather, when we talked the last time when we were going over this town hall neighborhood, town hall commons district, you and I had a conversation regarding doing a little bit more research into the vaunted residential versus commercial tax revenue, to either prove or disprove that constant mantra from certain ends of the non-development spectrum that, you know, residential doesn't pay for itself and commercial is so precious and it generates so much more tax revenue. Do we have any, have we gotten any we made any headway on that? Have we been able to get any information?
Since then, I looked into a little bit of how the auditor classifies land, the different land uses and how they assess them. It's based on a state standard. They look at the property and determine what the majority of the use of the property is and tax it accordingly based on the state standards. So it's not if it's zoned residential, it doesn't mean they're taxing it residential per se. For example, if there's one parcel that has 4 dwelling units on it, it's going to be taxed commercial. I pulled a shapefile from the county and did a quick and dirty map based on their land use classification code to kind of see, okay, well, how much land currently is being taxed residential versus commercial? Because I think in our 2004 comprehensive plan, there was some statistics being thrown out about this 92-8 split, that 92% of the township was being taxed residential and 8% was commercial. And I've heard it over and over again that we need to maintain that split. And in the comprehensive plan, it wasn't clear to me on how they actually came up with that split, whether it was based on a zoning designation or the auditor's land use classification. But I ran the statistics under how the properties in Concord are currently being taxed. And when you combine the commercial and industrial taxes, I believe it was about 10% of the land area in the community was currently being taxed as commercial and industrial, and about 56% was residential. Then there was agricultural, and then some other categories that were really small. But looking at the tax rates, the tax rate for commercial is a little bit higher in Concord. There's actually 3 different taxing districts. So there's the Mentor side of Concord, the Painesville, and then the small portion of Chardon, which we don't even have any, I don't believe, in the Chardon tax district. But in the majority of Concord, the rate between commercial and residential was like a 3 mil difference. So it wasn't a huge discrepancy in the different rates. And I think it's because of a lot of that is because of the school districts too. So I think it's kind of outside of what this board really looks at. We're not charged with looking at the taxes and whether or not we can make the economics work. I think that's more of the policies of the trustees to try to balance the taxes and know that. But I know that rezoning land could have implications on that. But I think we've maintained that split. If not, we've seen the commercial percentage increase. We've had a lot more commercial growth since 2004. So, and based on the statistics that I ran, we're at like 10% that's being taxed for commercial versus where we were. Plus, we have additional revenue streams through the JED, so we can get additional taxes through the income taxes of the folks that work in those businesses that are currently in the JED. So there's more potential that now than we had in 2004 when we originally did the comp plan.
Yeah, I think it's important to you're in the long game as far as us and taxation. You're right. That's not something we should look at, and that's not something we should really concern ourselves with. However, it is an argument that's constantly brought against this board whenever we consider any rezoning.
Yeah.
That residential does not, or residential doesn't pay for itself, and that we can't afford to rezone any commercial property to become residential because it would be a financial detriment to do that. And I would like to just, I would like to either prove that statement and say, yeah, that's a correct way to look at this, or disprove it, one or the other. I think, it'd be nice to know, because that's a kind of a known fact that gets thrown around pretty often when it comes time for public hearings and talking about rezoning issues and things like that. That it's a fact that residential doesn't pay for itself, and I don't know that that's true, and I don't know that that's false. It would be nice to know, so that we could at least, you know, when we do consider these issues, that we're not putting anything in peril from a financial standpoint to the township, you know. So it's nice, it's good to know. So that 92.8%, that 92 and 8%, 92%, 8%, that's not accurate either then.
I would say anymore, we're not at that split. I mean,
Right.
without being 100% clear on how they came up with that calculation, I
Right.
don't have all the details, but I would say we've maintained that, if not, we've made it better. We've got
Right.
more land being taxed as
Right.
commercial and industrial than we had in 2004.
Right.
I don't know that we can ever answer, you know, whether or not, I think it depends on the type of commercial or the type of residential, whether or not the cost of community services, you know, outweighs it.
There's too many variables, unfortunately, it sounds like. But if you just take the percentages of residential versus commercial, just the percentage alone should say you'd be making more input from residential than you would from commercial. Just common sense, I would think. Yes? No? I deal with numbers.
I can send you guys that information if you'd like to see it. I didn't have it with me this evening.
It's good to know.
So I just kind of point it back to the work session. I know Heather also sent us a memorandum last night regarding potential zoning amendments, but kind of getting back to the town hall thing, does anybody have comments or input or thought about leaving it on the agenda or moving it along, considering Heather's input and some of the other stuff she brought to us?
Well, I think if we're going, you know, if there's a bunch of consideration right now with regards to the fire department, you know, with that and everything else, we probably ought to just drop it. We ought to just permanently table it for now. We can always bring it back at another time, remove it from the agenda. I don't see any reason to keep it at this point.
You know?
I would agree with Andy.
I agree.
So we have more, you know, until we get the more formal feedback on the location or potential location of the fire departments, you know, new fire departments or whatever. new
Well, and I
fire
actually had
facilities.
Heather mentioned just tonight, I think the school too, the traffic and a lot of those other things. There's a lot of moving parts, and we were definitely at a, I don't want to say indecisive, but definitely had a lot of questions about what to do. I think there's a lot of good dialogue, but I think we were struggling for conclusion, and it's not going to get clearer. It's only going to have more data thrown at it. So I agree. I think it makes sense to set it aside and bring it back at a time that's a little more appropriate.
But I think once we get the fire facility issue resolved and once the school's built, I'm telling you right now, it's going to come back. It's going to continue coming back whether you want it or not. You know, it's the issue of developing that property over there in a residential format versus a commercial format is going to continue to come back to this board. And at some point in time, we have to make a decision how we want to approach that area, you know. So I think that, you know, we're just kicking the can down the road because I'm sure that in the next 6 months or, you know, just if history proves accurate, you know, I'm sure there's going to be another proposal that's going to come our way of somebody proposing either the north side or the south side of Concord-Hamden Road over there with residential development.
Well, I guess that's the question I'm asking. Do we want to leave it on the agenda for the next 6 to 9 months or pull it off and resurface it when it's relevant?
I think if you pulled it off and just addressed it when that next issue
Right.
comes up, it
Right.
might be 6 months, it could be 2 years. But whenever it comes up, we could address it at that time.
Right.
There's still the likelihood that someone could come in and want to develop it under its
Yeah.
current zoning.
That could happen too. It's not completely out of the
Wait,
question.
do we need a vote on that or on pulling it?
Sure.
All
Might
right.
as
So
well.
I'll entertain a motion to remove the work session from our agenda permanently or at least for the time being.
I second.
Yes, we got a motion for it.
We need a motion.
Oh, you need a
I'm
motion. I
asking
thought
for
you were giving
one.
one.
Go
I
ahead,
can't
Andy.
give one.
Mr. Chairman, I so move to remove the Township Neighborhood and Township Hall Commons District off our agenda until further notice.
Second,
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All in favor, I oppose, so the work session will be removed from the agenda for now. Heather, is there anything did you want to discuss at all, some of the stuff that you gave us as far as proposed amendments before we?
Yeah, maybe just real brief. Maybe we
Sure.
can talk about this in more detail later on, but I know I sent this memo to you at last minute. It's kind of a lengthy list of some potential future text amendments that we should maybe consider addressing over the next several months to a year. Most of these would be beneficial to the township as a whole in general, while some of them are a little bit more focused on helping support the implementation of the town center master plan. I'll just kind of briefly go through it. So the first item in the memo was consider reviewing some of the existing definitions and determine if there's any necessary revisions. For example, we have a lot of different dwelling definitions that are scattered throughout the zoning resolution. Some of them are related to dwellings that we do not even allow within the township. So I think it would be beneficial to review those definitions, try to regroup them, maybe eliminate some of the uses we do not allow within the community. I know last year we were talking about eliminating live-work units from the ISPD, the Innovative Site Plan Development, due to the fact that the uncertainty if the business failed, that you would not be able to live in, if the business failed, you could not rent out the business and you'd have empty storefronts on the first floor. So we were hoping to get rid of that, and some of those are some of the things that got pushed aside last year. But we could possibly take a look at some of that while just reviewing the definitions. While doing that too, we should consider removing square footage, sizes, and density from those definitions. Instead, they should be included within the district regulations and not in the definition itself. And the other issue, and this has come up a little bit, is whether or not we should allow fee simple lots on private streets. I know a couple of developers have asked to do this, and it's something that maybe we should consider in planned unit developments, where a developer could do a private street and do a fee simple lot, which is a lot where you would own your lot like you own all of you own your lots where you live. There's some developments like Gabriel's Edge or RA's Way where you don't actually own the land around your property. You're on a private street and you just have exclusive use to that. The idea has been kicked around by some people that they want to do private streets, but they want to own the land. So our definition of lot would preclude that because it says it has a front on a publicly dedicated street. So that might be something that we want to take a look at and determine if that would be an appropriate use within possibly a planned development area. Some other considerations, updating some of the other definitions, separating use and building from principal and accessory uses. It would permit a clean definition or inference that permits more than one principal building per lot, but maybe only one or more principal use per lot. So I know when I first started reading our zoning resolution, it wasn't clear to me whether or not you could have multiple buildings on lots, because it didn't really specify that. Some of these housekeeping things could make it a little bit more clear whether or not we want to allow more than one building on a lot, or as long as there was just one use on the lot. For example, like the Cryle Crossing Retail Center, there's one primary use, and that's a commercial retail center, but there are several buildings on that, several primary buildings on that parcel. So I think we could clean up the text by making it clear that that is permitted.
Have you found anything in particular on this list that you gave us that's really becoming a pain that we should address right away, possibly?
Well, I think that possibly taking a look at the definitions, because definitions really are key when enforcing zoning.
Right.
So if we could take a good detailed look at the existing definitions that we have, and also defining a few other terms that we don't have defined in there. I know, like, we don't have a definition for porch, but we somewhat regulate them. So I think we need to define that in the zoning resolution. Now we have a couple standards on sidewalks that could be permitted or required in the capital district, but we don't define what that sidewalk is. So I think in order to be in front of potential development further development in the corridor, helping define some of these things such as sidewalk, streetscape, patio, porch. We also have a lot of uses that are permitted in the residential districts that we don't define, that right now is not an issue, but could be in the future. Big things like we permit arboretums and community parks and golf courses, but we don't even define what these are. So I think that we should, in my opinion, focusing on the definitions would probably be a good start. And also taking a look at the table of uses in all of our districts, specifically the commercial districts. I believe I brought this up a few, maybe last year. In the R2 PUD, you're allowed to do a small commercial center, and they have a long list of uses that are allowed, but we don't define any of those uses. I think that the list of uses was generated like in 1986 when the district was adopted. We don't define what the uses are, and also prohibit some of the uses that may be needed in that area. And currently, right now, the developer of some land that's going to be used for that district is getting ready to create parcels. And I know he has plans to do some things there, so I think we should take a look at those uses. And not only that R2 PUD district, but maybe while we're taking a look at all of the districts and see whether or not we need to make any changes.
Based on, what you have found, does the state have regulations that are maybe uniform throughout the state, that we could plug in those things to save time, possibly, that would address issues like this quickly, rather than us going through each one,
For
all-
uses or
Yeah.
for
In
permitted?
general, I mean, the items that you brought up in general,
No, there's
No?
no state standard, there's no.
nothing that could help for
No.
you to not recreate the wheel, if you know what I mean?
No, I mean, I don't think we need to recreate the wheel per se. We have a good basis. It's just reviewing them and making sure that it still aligns with how we want the corridor to build out. I think there's some uses that are currently listed in the capital district that we might not want to see actually developed over there. I know, like, so the land that's currently zoned capital, there's gas stations are a conditionally permitted use in there. I don't know that if, that actually gets developed under capital, that having a gas station at the entryway to what could be the town center over in that area would be an ideal gateway. So
So
that
there'd
might
be
be
some
one.
conflict that could
Yeah.
start developing because of the development that's going on
Mhm.
already.
Right.
That's a good point, a gas station being right there, I've been in communities where they have like that going into subdivisions, for example, and it's all tied up with, like you say, a gas station, cars all going in and out before you even get in to the subdivisions. It's just a massive traffic
Mhm.
all the time because of the residents that are trying to come in and out, along with the people that are driving through the community and need gas. They stop there, and it gets, especially during the working day, become quite cumbersome
Mhm.
traffic-wise. So I understand where you're coming from. So that sounds like something that should be addressed. You're right away because of how quickly it's developing up
Mhm.
there.
Right. I think gas stations do like to site on corners there.
Always,
So
that's,
I
yeah.
mean,
Right off of freeways, right off of big commercial areas, they like to pop in a
Mhm.
big gas station. And right now, all of them have food and everything. You can buy alcohol, you can do all, and I've seen big trucks coming in there sometimes trying to support them.
mhm.
Traffic jams. I drive around a lot because of what I do. And I see that, this can become a very cumbersome situation. That would be something I'd want to tackle real quickly, to be honest with you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're okay.
So definitions and table of uses are your top priorities there. Anything else?
Yeah, if we were gonna pick an order, maybe I'd probably start with definitions, because I know definitions will trickle into other sections of the zoning code. It's never just contained right to definitions, you tweak the definition, you need to make sure you're doing your due diligence and looking at, okay, how does it affect the actual district where that use might be permitted? And if we do try to eliminate the density requirements within the district, we need to make sure we're clear within that district that we're keeping the same density, we're not changing anything, because I don't think we're looking at changing densities or anything like that. We're not trying to make big, different land use decisions, just streamline the code and make it a little bit more user-friendly and put the regulations within the district, not in the definitions. But yeah, I would say definitions and then table of uses would probably be where I'd like to potentially start if this board would want staff to start maybe looking at some of these things. I know you probably didn't get a lot of time to read through this, and maybe rather than going through all of this, we can hang on to this memo and we can kind of.
Well, I think to Frank's point about what's most important, because it's all on the list, it could take us quite a bit of time to
Yeah,
do
oh
all
yeah,
that,
this
so.
is nothing that I would imagine we would do in any short amount of time. We can definitely break this up over our normal course of doing housekeeping amendment type items to the zoning resolution. I know a few years ago, when I first started, I think Bruce and I put together a pretty lengthy list of, hey, these are some things we need to tackle over
Right.
time, and some of those are still on this list, but
Okay.
they're not necessarily priorities. They're
Right.
kind of at the bottom, so.
Okay, so we want to go ahead and move, I mean, is there anything else you needed to add as far as that information, or we'll kind of focus on those first two items, and that'll be what we'll see from you coming up, and,
Yeah, and I think, I'm definitely gonna wanna meet with legal,
Right.
prior to giving you anything of too much, like, but I'd like to start taking a look at what definitions are in there and getting a preliminary stab at doing these.
Especially if it's making it difficult for you when these things come up to deal with the developers and, designers and all that kind of stuff. Makes your job harder
Right,
if it's not clarified.
yeah.
So, totally understand.
do you have anything else for us, or?
Other than that, there was something else I just wanted to mention, because I know it's a section of the current zoning resolution that we've never actually implemented. As you know, in 2014, the township adopted a whole new sign resolution. And in part of that sign code, there's a large campus designation, so I did provide you a copy of that section of the zoning resolution in front of you this evening. But basically, the zoning inspector has the discretion, if they receive a sign permit application, as the zoning inspector, we either approve the zoning permit application, we deny it because it doesn't meet some standards, or if it meets certain criteria, we can determine that it's a large campus designation. And basically, in order to be classified a large campus, it has to encompass more than 10 acres of land, and it has to have multiple buildings on it, where portions of the buildings might not have visibility from main streets, and where, due to the project size or arrangement of buildings, site circulation, that the number of permitted signs, size and location might not be adequate in the zoning resolution. So I've been in conversations with the sign company that was hired by the Auburn Career Center. They've undergone a pretty substantial rebranding exercise where they're going to be, over time, trying to redo all their signage on their campus. So I know you're somewhat familiar with Auburn Career Center. They're actually spread out over 3 different parcels. They front on both the west and the east sides of Auburn Road and on Girdle Road. A preliminary look at what they're looking to do, there was no way that I was going to be able to approve their signs, the number of signs that they want under our current code. It's actually zoned R1, which is a little bit more restrictive when it comes to institutional uses versus if they were actually in a commercial district. I feel like that area feels commercial. It doesn't even feel residential, And I'm pretty sure that when they actually submit to me, that I'm probably gonna recommend that they come in front of this board for your consideration. So I just wanted to bring that up to you as a heads up, because I know it's something we've never done. I'd probably put together a staff report for you guys, similar to what we do for site plan review, and give a recommendation. And if it was to either approve, deny, or recommend approval with some modifications. But it really is on the applicant to prove to this board, well, under 30.06A, these are some of the criteria that you should consider, but it is up to them to prove to you for each sign why they need that sign and why it's proposed. They would have to provide, a detailed site plan in advance showing the location of all the signs, elevations of all the buildings, and how those signs would be perceived by the public, so you could actually get a good idea of what it would look like if you were driving by. Description of the proposed sign, whether or not they're going to be illuminated signs, electronic message centers, any kind of things like that. But it's more than likely that this application will come in front of the board. I just didn't want to blindside you if that were to happen sometime over the next, probably before the end of the year.
I was reading number 4 where it says upon the disapproval that the zoning commission would respond in writing within 5 days. Would that be?
Well,
One of us?
at the meeting, if you guys disapproved it, you probably state reasons as to why.
Oh,
And
okay,
I would
so-
write that letter as your secretary. So
Oh, I'm
within,
like,
yeah,
okay.
within 5 days, I would write that letter on behalf of this board, yeah.
Okay.
So, I don't know if there's any questions on that, maybe you don't have any questions yet.
Not really. I noticed St. Gabe's has, its electronic sign that goes around, gives all kinds of data as you're driving by. Something like that, and I'm gonna say that bothers me, but if you concentrate on the sign, what it's saying, you could lose track of where you're driving.
I know that
I
sign was
was-
put in before we had the current sign code we have.
Yeah.
I think they got a variance to do that, but we do allow the electronic message centers like that now, but it does have some standards on how quickly the message can change.
8 seconds.
So under the current code, yeah, it's every no more than 8 seconds. It can't be scrolling or flashing, so I don't know what St. Gabe's does, but it might be non-conforming. I don't know if it does anything.
Well, they list the masses, which is understandable.
Yeah,
And any special events that they have, of course, is on there too.
yeah,
And schools, and then, of course, they have a little message, sometimes wishing you be safe, and there's an upcoming religious holiday, masses will be like this.
yeah.
So,
And
things
then-
things of that
Doesn't
nature.
Drugmart have an electronic sign?
Yeah, like Drug Mart does too.
I was gonna count when I drove by, like, how many
I'll
seconds?
send
1002.
Jared over there to count in between seconds.
That would be distracting. You do read them when you're
I
driving.
do, eyes go over to them, just because of the nature they draw your attention. I mean, you get on 271, for example, in the south, they have these
Big one.
massive,
Yeah.
large signs that are showing dealership information, I mean, all kinds of stuff. That if you're sitting there just glancing up at it for a brief second, it going at supposedly 60 miles an hour, you've traveled a distance of almost 2 football fields, just in that short length of time, you could run into somebody. So that could be disturbing. Of course, I should call. The state has them on there too with their Amber Alerts and everything else too, so where do you draw the line? Or
Well, and maybe that's something else. I know we just adopted that sign code in 14, but do we really want electronic message centers all down Cryle Road and down Auburn Road?
Right.
Is that the look we want? I mean, does
Yeah.
that fit in with the corridor, the vision?
You're right.
I don't know, you can see drug marts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one at the Vista Springs on Auburn Road.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's right.
Personally, I'm not really a fan of them, I'd rather not have them, but I know that decision.
Only
I
because,
wasn't here for all that when you guys had those
Yeah.
discussions,
Yeah.
but
only
something to,
because they can be very distracting. That's my concern.
but it's not even just from a distraction standpoint, the aesthetics and how you want the corridor to build out and
That
and
too.
look, But at some point too, I think on this list further down was signs. And I know I brought it up a couple other times, that we still have some issues with content neutrality.
Right.
We regulate some of the signs based on
Right.
messages, so that would probably be another priority of mine. And I'd probably bump up on the list too.
Yeah.
So. Can't do it all at once. I mean, we gotta do a little bit as we can. I mean, I'm not asking to do all these things at once.
Well, the way the township's developing, which is really starting to go great guns, things like this really should be addressed as quick as you possibly
Yeah.
can before it gets away from you.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to be like a Las Vegas. Jeez, oh man. You ever been to Las Vegas?
Yeah, and there's other things that I kind of question in the sign code. We allow pole signs up to 20 feet in height on Crowell Road. And it's likely that we're gonna have somebody submit an application like that, and it's permitted,
Yeah,
so.
good point.
To add signs to the list.
What's that?
Add signs to the list.
It's on there, yeah, if there's a few things in there maybe we need to rethink.
Okay. Any other
That's all I
comments or
have.
questions for Heather before we move along? Okay, moving on to the second item, approval of the minutes from the July 10th meeting. Take a motion to approve them.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the July 10th, 2018 minutes of our meeting as written.
Second,
I second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, the minutes are passed. Correspondence from the zoning commission members, Frank?
Correspondence. I've had phone calls over the weeks from my neighborhood. People concerned about what's the regulations of open burning and recreational fire and stuff like that. So I took it upon myself to go over to Fire Station 1 a couple weeks ago, and they gave me two documents. One, of course, is from the Concord Fire Department. Bless you.
Excuse me, thank you.
Recreational fire, the regulations by from the state, and also what was put into the grapevine that we did in this year. And I made copies of that and circulated through my development so I can answer people's questions, because we've had some residents starting to burn open trees and stuff in their backyards, which of course is not really allowed to a degree. So that was my correspondence part of taking care of this particular situation in my development. So have a word of offering, because I know where I live, my home is somewhat in a little bit of a valley. And if everybody's burning stuff and you try to open up your windows, it's choking. You can't do that in the evening. And somehow it's getting out of hand. So that's why they asked me, and that's why I took it upon myself to do this in my neighborhood. So just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Nothing from me.
Sue?
Nothing?
Rich?
Just casual inquiries as what's going on Crow Road, that's it.
Okay. I didn't have any correspondence to report. And any audience participation this evening? Appear that we have any audience here. So the next meeting is scheduled for September 4th, 2018. And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting.
We didn't get the...